Dedicated to the survival of American democracy in an increasingly dangerous world, this is Secure Freedom Radio with Frank Gaffney, acted as Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy under President Ronald Reagan, founder and president of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C., the go-to man for defense and foreign policy issues, joined by the greatest minds in the security policy business, the special forces in the war of ideas at Secure Freedom Radio with Frank Gaffney.
Welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. This is Frank Gaffney, your host and guide for what I think of as an intelligence briefing on the war for the free world. There is a dark cloud on the horizon, if not actually almost overhead at the moment. It is a cloud that has been brought vastly closer by today's action by the United Nations, in which it endorsed a deal, I call it the Obama bomb deal with Iran, that will assuredly bring about not only nuclear weapons in that country, but probably in a number of its neighbors, with one can only imagine the horrific consequences. One of the people who has been following the United Nations, as well as these proliferation issues from North Korea to Pakistan to Iran, is our first guest. She is Claudia Rosett, one of the great investigative reporters of our time, long with the Wall Street Journal, now the journalist in residence with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. You can also find her writings at Forbes.com and PJ Media, where she has a column as well. Claudia, a dark day, I'm afraid. But tell us a little bit about what the UN did just now.
The 15-member UN Security Council just this morning unanimously adopted a resolution that endorses the Iran nuclear deal and brings it basically into the umbrella of the UN, that now enshrines it at the UN with this Byzantine, lengthy, complex resolution, which then sort of makes official within the UN the even more Byzantine, even more lengthy, and fundamentally unworkable Iran nuclear deal that was cut with the U.S. and Germany, France, Russia, China, Britain in Vienna.
I gather there was essentially no debate, a couple of maybe pro forma statements, but no real deliberation about this deal. It sounds as though it was completely cooked and wired. Is that right?
Yeah, Germany enthused, but that's basically right. It was presented as a done deal. It had been negotiated already by the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, the veto wielding 5 plus Germany. And Israel's ambassador stepped out afterwards to say Israel is not a member of the Security Council, never has been, although Venezuela currently is. But Israel's ambassador stepped out to say, and I think he's right, that this is actually a very dark day. They quote, "Today you have awarded a great prize to the most dangerous country in the world," which I think is exactly right.
Claudia, one other thing that is, I'm afraid, indisputable about this is that it has deeply undermined the constitutional process of the United States. Even the so-called Corker-Cardin bill that was fashioned as a mechanism for ensuring that Congress had some say in all of this seems to have been, thrown over the side by the Obama administration in its pursuit of essentially wiring the game so that it doesn't matter what Congress does, at least with respect to many of the sanctions, international sanctions as well as European. What do you make of that?
Oh, it's terrible. What's just happened is it's both a terrible precedent within the U.S. and bad for the world. What happened there is President Obama did an end run, having promised Congress with the compromise that produced that bill that you just described, that they would get a 60-day review period, and if the deadline was overrun as it was for reaching this deal, they would get a 60-day review period, a say in whether or not this thing should pass. Instead, as soon as the deal was announced last week in Vienna, the U.S. began circulating the draft resolution that has been approved at the UN Security Council today, and then it went to a vote and passed unanimously first thing this morning. So this now puts President Obama in a position to say, especially to Democratic members of Congress who are under huge pressure right now. In fact, I believe lead negotiator Wendy Sherman has a busy day on the Hill, I see, on the State Department schedule, while John Kerry is busy welcoming the Cuban foreign minister, but that's another front, and pressuring members of Congress to okay the deal. And what President Obama will now be able to tell them is, look, you have no backup via the UN. They're lifting sanctions. They've approved a deal that will, in phases, take the sanctions off Iran, that is going to encourage member states, in fact, Frank, to provide nuclear research and development help to Iran. It leaves Iran with access to earn hundreds of billions in oil freely in world markets, gives it a 100 billion or so effective signing bonus in the release of its frozen funds up front, takes the arms embargo off, which is not even nuclear, it's an arms embargo, but terrorism problems. After 5 years, the missile embargo after 8, think intercontinental ballistic missiles, those can hit us. Look, the UN is highly corruptible. It's a collectivist organization in which the only member that typically has taken responsibility in years past is the United States, which is also the main bankroller of the place. In this case, we have an American administration that is using the UN to do end runs around our own elected lawmakers. So the American people never saw this draft resolution that was approved today, never actually heard it debated. It wasn't really debated at the UN, it was just passed. And there it is. And this is going to be shoved in the faces of our elected lawmakers as you better now approve this because otherwise nobody else is going to be with you. That's the role. They're being strong-armed, in other words,
with a view to short-circuiting their review and deliberations and debate as well. Again, our guest is Claudia Rosett, the journalist in residence at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. She has written extensively and brilliantly over decades on all of these issues, and I think the importance of all of that work is really being brought to the fore right now, Claudia. We need your expertise more now than ever. Specifically, you've written about how nuclear extortion was actually pioneered by Iran's partners in North Korea, and that they are now perfecting the game with the kind of negotiations and the deal that has been struck. Develop that thought a little bit for us, because it didn't end well in North Korea the last time I checked.
North Korea has nuclear weapons and is making more. And what nuclear extortion has been about is North Korea, back in the early 90s under President Clinton, threatened to start producing nuclear weapons. That brought the U.S. and other parties to the bargaining table. And in their zeal to arrive at a diplomatic, peaceful so-called conclusion to this problem, they cut a deal, the agreed framework, which gave North Korea this whole basket of goodies in exchange for North Korea's promise that it would not pursue this nuclear weapons program. Well, North Korea did what strong men do. This is the Tony Soprano of the world nuclear set. North Korea pocketed the concessions and then went ahead with cheating on the agreement and developing nuclear weapons anyway. The U.S. under President Bush tried this, went to the table again. Again, North Korea extorted concessions. Aid, diplomatic concessions, was taken off the terrorist list, got paid to blow up what was actually a symbolic, unimportant nuclear cooling tower. We paid them, and then cheated again, walked away, pocketed the deal, and at this point has carried out 3 nuclear tests, is estimated by the Chinese, no less, to likely have produced something on the order of 20 nuclear warheads by next year.
Yeah. And warheads is the operative word there, because they will be fitted on ballistic missiles, and they are increasing the range of those missiles and becoming more and more of a threat by the day.
Correct. It's an extortion racket, and Iran has now played this game even better than North Korea without even having conducted a nuclear test. They have just wrested massive concessions from U.S. and other diplomats desperate to please at the bargaining table. When you start doing this, we've entered an age in which nuclear extortion works. Every country in the world is going to read that message, and we're going to see proliferation coming out of this on a scale that nobody who aspires to diplomatic measures to contain these things will be able to do anything about. In other words, this is a road to much worse war than anything we would have faced now.
Yeah, and this is the tragedy of the narrative that the administration is pushing, that The alternative to this is war. You will get both, unfortunately. This bad deal and war, probably thermonuclear at that. Claudia Rosett, I hope we're wrong, but I fear we're right. Thank you very much for your insights here and elsewhere, Forbes and PJ Media. Keep it up and come back to us again very soon. Next up, we'll be speaking with Robert Dubeck. We'll talk about his insights into another war, the Vietnam War, and the efforts to commemorate it. That and more straight ahead.
Visit us at facebook.com/securefreedom with Frank Gaffney.